Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back or welcome to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am so excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 210. If you missed my last episode, number 209, I shared with you all 5 positives of anxiety. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Those words don't really sound like they go together. Positive and anxiety, which is exactly why I wanted to do that episode. As someone who struggles on a day-to-day basis with severe anxiety, I know what it can be like to start to form a negative bias around that word and start to feel like anxiety is out to get you, it's there to attack you. But in truth, anxiety is actually on your side, and it is there to protect you, to keep you safe, and to let you know when things are maybe a potential threat or are harmful or remind you of something. In real time, if you can hear little clicks outside my door, my dog is trying to play with my cat, I believe is what's going on. So I do apologize if you can hear that, but I'm really excited to talk about today's topic. Today we're going to talk about 10 reasons that you overthink. And a lot of them overlap with each other because in a lot of ways, a lot of them are very similar, but they can be a little bit individualized. But I want you to quickly just stop and ask yourself, do you ever find yourself overthinking about one thing, going to the next thing, or something happens and you find yourself thinking about the worst case scenario? You find yourself catastrophizing about everything that's going to go wrong and everything that's going to happen. And I would bet all my money that there's a reason you're listening to this podcast, because that is you. You are an overthinker. You are someone that carries the weight of the world on your shoulders. You care deeply about everything that you do and about how your actions affect everybody in your work and the ripple effect of your actions. And that is why you are here and listening to this episode. And I first off just want to thank you for tuning into a place where you can learn about maybe some of the reasons in which you overthink, where that maybe comes from, where that stems from, why it happens. One of my most popular episodes that I did in the last year was episode 123, where I shared with you guys 4 ways to stop overthinking. I was looking back today when I was planning today's episode, and I realized that that was one of the most popular ones. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. Because if you are into self-improvement, you have a passion for learning about mental health, or you struggle with mental health, you likely are an overthinker. And I was doing some research and I found out that 73% of people between the ages of 25 and 35 struggle with overthinking. 73% of people. And again, that's just what was captured. I don't know about you, but I wasn't asked to be a part of that study, but I definitely would have put my hand up and agreed. I guarantee you that number is actually a lot higher, which shows that overthinking is something that affects all of us tremendously. And it can affect our quality of life. It can affect our relationships. It can affect us being present and in the moment, because we spend so much time up here in our minds. And I know that we get so accustomed to living up there, and we get so accustomed to overthinking that we think that that's the only way to live. But I want to normalize these conversations so that we can work towards improving it. And as always, I have definitely not overcome overthinking. Just this last week, it has been the theme of catastrophizing this week. I have been overwhelmed. There's been extra stuff going on. I'm extra stressed, a lot of decisions to be made. And I'm just overthinking. I haven't been sleeping, which guess what? When we don't sleep, and our brain doesn't have the chance to properly rest and it's exhausted, we overthink even more and we get into these cycles. And so as much as today, I don't really have the answer for you guys, I definitely encourage you to check out episode 123. I wanted to more so focus today on 10 reasons why you overthink. Maybe you can validate for yourself why you specifically are an overthinker. And maybe even that in and of itself validates something for you of where that comes from. When we can validate, okay, I'm overthinking right now because blank. It can help us just give ourselves permission to allow our brain to do what it needs to do. So without further ado, here are 10 reasons why you, my friend, overthink. The first reason is the desire for control. When you think about what overthinking does, it's trying to put your consciousness into the future so you can dissect every little thing about it. The same rings true as if you're thinking or reminiscing about something in the past. You're trying to macro look at a situation and overanalyze it so you can have a sense of control. When we do that about the future, we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do, right? What is all the things that could go wrong? And it's typically not the positives, right? It's all the things that could go wrong. We try to overanalyze and think about that. When we look at the past, we're often analyzing, I should have done this, I could have done this, I wish I would have said that, I wish I wouldn't have said that. And so we're just very much looking at it from a macro aspect. And so knowing that one of the largest reasons why we overthink is because there's a part of us that maybe feels out of control or has felt out of control in a situation. And so allowing yourself the opportunity to overthink about something can be very empowering. Again, these episodes are not designed to be like, we should stop overthinking, because everything serves a purpose. Not everything, but overthinking does serve a purpose in some way, shape, or form at times in the right dosage. When we take the time to overthink about things, we're able to be critical, we're able to analyze it, we're able to really zoom out and think about it versus just making rash decisions. So in some ways, overthinking about stuff is actually wonderful and it's a great thing. But when you look at it from the approach or from the aspect of the need to have control, even asking yourself that the next time you're overthinking, is there a part of me that's really hyper focusing on this because I feel out of control in some way? So that is the number one reason why you probably overthink, is because there's a part of you that didn't feel like it has had control or feels like it needs to have control. And again, a lot of these are very, very similar. The second one is uncertainty about something. If you are uncertain about something, your brain likes to have answers. It does not like, the unknown. And so when we don't have that next page of the book there written for us, our brain's like, well, let me paint a picture for you. Let me draw up that page for you. And it's almost always inaccurate. It almost always has a negative bias. It almost always is written in a way, the worst case scenario, because that's what we do to ourselves. And so when we're uncertain about something, it leaves our brain to imagine all the possibilities. And I don't know about you, but when I leave my brain to go to any possibility, it's not picking like the rainbows and butterflies route. It's typically picking the worst case scenario. And so that is the second reason in which you overthink, is because there's something in your life that you're uncertain about. Maybe it's applying for a new job and you're uncertain if you're going to get it, and so you overthink about it. Maybe you haven't heard back from your new crush, and so you overthink about it and you're like, oh, they hate me. They probably don't like me. Like, I don't know about it. Like, what did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? You're uncertain. And uncertainty is our brain's worst enemy. Number 3, past experiences. When we've had experiences in the past, so for example, fear of making mistakes, you are going to be very hypercritical of ensuring that you do not make those same mistakes again. Especially if you've gotten in trouble in the past for doing something wrong, your brain's going to try to do everything to avoid that, right? And that is kind of like where anxiety comes in, and you're starting to see the themes. But past experiences can really make overthinking perpetuate, and it can excel it, and it can make it more advanced, especially if we've seen something before. Our brain's like, oh, I already have evidence around this. Fantastic. I'm going to paint a big picture of what is possibly going wrong. We see this all the time in relationships where your partner maybe does something that is similar to another partner that you've been hurt by, and your brain overthinks and pinpoints those emotions onto that person. So I've shared before on here, at the beginning of mine and my current partner's relationship, he'd always put his phone face down. And I realize now he does that so he can be present in the moment with me, and I love that, and we've talked through it. But in the beginning, I was like, he's cheating on me for sure. Because in the past, partners have done that all to find out that flipping it over, there was a reason, is because they were hiding something. But I would start to overthink every time he would put his phone upside down, because I would just start to tell myself all the reasons in which this equates to he is cheating on me. So past experiences could be a reason why you're overthinking. Ask yourself, have I felt this emotion before? Have I seen this before? Am I overthinking about something that is familiar to me? And if so, taking the time to stop that hamster wheel and be like, is this logical of me, or am I thinking out of impulse because I'm trying to protect myself, right? Anytime that we overthink, when we can stop that hamster wheel and just analyze what we're thinking about and why we're thinking about it, it allows us a chance to just come back to our body, come back to our logic thoughts, and just interrupt that thought pattern. The other day, I was catastrophizing the shit out of a situation, and I stopped and I journaled about it. And as soon as I put the pen down when I was done, I was like, that was so stupid. Like, in hindsight, it's not, because it mattered to me. But it was stupid. It was something really, really dumb and insignificant. But in the moment when it was in my brain, it felt horrible. It felt huge. It felt very overwhelming. But we have to stop and interrupt our thoughts sometimes so we can recognize, hey, this is actually kind of silly. But when we have past experiences that have led to us being hurt, of course we're going to overthink about it. Of course we're going to overanalyze it, because we're like, hello, I don't want to be hurt again. Let me think of the worst case scenario that can happen so I can protect myself. Which brings me to number 4, which is very similar to number 2 and that one, is anxiety about something. If you have anxiety around something, you're going to overthink about it. Here's what I want you to know. When we are anxious or overthinking about something, it's almost always because we care about the outcome. We care about it. There's something that is going to directly affect us. And so a part of us overthinking and being anxious about something is actually really cool and empowering when we view it in that way. Because it's like, oh, I'm anxious about this because there's a part of me that cares. I'm anxious about the fact that I noticed my partner's phone was upside down because I love him and I'm scared that he's going to hurt me. Isn't that kind of cool? I'm overthinking about it and I'm anxious about it because I care. But anxiety is a huge byproduct of overthinking, and vice versa. We overthink, we feel anxious, we're anxious, we overthink. And recognizing that those kind of go on a loophole, a continuous cycle, allows us, again, I encourage you to just stop and notice. Notice your body. How are you feeling? Where are you feeling that anxiety? Is it a familiar feeling? Okay, number 5. The 5th reason you likely are overthinking, it's because you're stressed out. I don't know about you, but when you're stressed, you're tired, you're hungry, you are more susceptible to overthinking. The reason being is because you're overwhelmed. You have less capacity. It's like our window of tolerance. When we have less capacity to take on things, our brain is more likely to be negative. Our brain is more likely to not think logically and to go to the worst case. And so if you've been more stressed at work, more stressed at home, more stressed financially, more stressed with your health, whatever it is, when you are more stressed, you are more likely to overthink about everything. That's why there is some benefit, and I know there's controversy around this. If you and your partner are in a disagreement and you're overthinking and it's just not going anywhere, sometimes getting a good night's sleep is the best thing that you can do to then tend to that conversation. Because if you're stressed and overwhelmed, your overthinking is going to take over and you're not going to be thinking logically, right? And so ask yourself, have I been more stressed lately? Is my stress leading into me being, more of an overthinker? And is my overthinking making me more stressed? And are they just playing into each other? That's why mindfulness is so important. And that's one of the things that I talk about in episode 123 is the concept of, we hear mindfulness and we think it's this woo stupid thing, but really all it is taking time to ground yourself and come back to your body. To cut off those intrusive thoughts for just a second. To take a second to notice that you're even having those thoughts, because so many thoughts that we have in the run of our day are subconscious. And when we're stressed, those subconscious thoughts have that negative bias, which makes everything just so much more worse. Yes, that's fantastic. Great English. It makes everything seem harder and more challenging. Number 6. Oh, I realized I already kind of said this one, but because you care, you start to worry, right? When you care about something, you're going to overthink about it. I didn't really realize that I had said those two together. I apologize. I got ahead of myself. But the 6th thing that I wrote down is because you give a shit. You overthink because you care. I had applied for another job last week, and I've decided I'm staying in my current position, but I was overthinking that so much. What if I mess it up? What if my current manager hates me for, applying to this other job? And what if, I lose my job now because I stepped out of that? And I was just like, overthinking. And then I stopped myself in real time and I'm like, you're worried because you care. When you are someone who wears your heart on your sleeve and you're someone who cares about how your actions affect others, empaths, I'm speaking to you directly. This one, I hope, hits your heart and you know that you're not alone. We overthink about things because we worry. We worry about things because there's a part of us that just wants to keep us safe, right? That's typically our inner child coming out that just wants to people please, right? It wants to keep everybody happy, it wants to keep the peace. And when that peace feels unbalanced, we try to do anything to swing in the opposite direction to balance that out, often at a detriment of ourselves and our own happiness because we take the weight of everything. You're not alone in that. You overthink because you care. If there's one sentence you take away from this podcast, I hope that it is that one. That you are an overthinker because you give a shit about your life, about the lives of others, about how your actions affect others, about how your words affect others. And that makes you an amazing human being. And I know that it is without a doubt from experiences that you have been through that have developed you to be like this. And as much as, it's not okay that you've had to go through horrendous stuff or you have trauma, that has built you into somebody that really cares about what you do. And you think because you care. Number 7, fear of any outcome. This is like the what if mentality. You overthink because you're like, well, what if this happens? And then if that happens, well, what if this happens? And if that happens, then well, what if this happens? I remember being in high school and being like, well, if I fail this exam and then I fail this class and then I don't get into university and then, I don't get a good job and then blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, you catastrophize everything. I'm 25 and I still remember being in high school carrying that much weight and overthinking that much about an exam because I was like, this is going to equate to me ruining my life if I don't pass this exam. We carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. I said that in the introduction. When we have a fear of the outcome, it makes us overthink. Imagine if we flipped that fear into, well, what is the best case scenario? We're really good at overthinking from a negative context, but what if we began to overthink? And I know this sounds crazy, and I'm trying to believe this is even possible, but we overthink from a best case scenario. What if I kill that interview? What if that date went awesome? What if that person actually really likes me? What if I'm going to be so successful? What if I'm going to ace this test? What if I'm going to get on that sports team? But we don't think or talk like that. That takes a lot of time and patience and work and rewiring to get there. But you overthink about things because you have a fear of what the outcome is. Especially if there is an outcome, we're a lot more likely to overthink about it because there's something on the other side, right? We attach the negative outcome to us personally, which 9 times out of 10 makes us show up not to the best of our ability because we're so stressed out. We're so worried. But that is a huge reason why you might be overthinking, is because you have a fear of the outcome. And again, it all comes back to because you care. I can see why I kind of said that one early, because the theme is true. All these emotions stem from the same place because you give a shit and you care. Okay, number 8, you could never do anything right in the past. me kind of saying, a lot of this comes from childhood or from the past, or maybe your grades were never good enough. Maybe you were never smart enough. You were never fast enough in sports. You never cleaned the house correctly. You never walked the dog right. Like, these sound very, very stupid, but it's true. And when we were brought up to question our every move if we had emotional abuse, or maybe you're with a partner or have been with a partner who you unfortunately have experienced emotional abuse, you start to question everything that you do. I remember I had a partner in the past, and I was cutting onions one time, and he stopped me. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I remember being like, "I'm cutting an onion." Like, what do you mean? And I remember him just being like, "That's not how you do it." And ever since then, every time I'm cutting an onion, I'm overthinking it. I think I'm doing it wrong. I just hear his voice in my head. But imagine if you had those experiences every single day about every single thing that you did as a human being. Nothing was ever good enough. Nothing you ever accomplished was ever good enough. You are going to subconsciously wear that on the back of your mind all the time until you start to notice that, right? And so that's a huge reason why you might be overthinking, is because you could never do anything right at one point in time in your life. And this is where, as always, you knew this plug was coming. This is why I am so passionate about going to therapy. Because even if you don't realize that certain things have affected you, or maybe you don't even realize that you're an overthinker or you overanalyze things. And just like my last episode on anxiety, overthinking is on a spectrum, right? I know that I am a critical, hyper overthinker. Every action I do, I think of every possible outcome that could have. And sometimes that's great. But a lot of times it's exhausting, it's overwhelming, and it hurts my mental health. It makes me feel depressed, makes me feel anxious, makes me shut down, and I'm working on it. But I've also validated where that comes from for me. And so knowing that maybe in the past you could never do anything right, and maybe you've never even validated that for yourself or unpacked that for yourself, there's likely a part of you that's very like tiptoey, feeling like you're walking on eggshells, and you don't know why, right? You probably struggle with sleep. Your digestion might be off, right? These are all signs that you're living in a sympathetic nervous system, in that fight or flight. And a huge symptom of being in fight or flight is of overthinking, is of that hamster wheel. Okay, number 9, negative thinking patterns. So again, that negative bias that comes in. If you have a negative bias that plays all the time in your brain, that could be a large reason why you overthink. When you think of the worst case scenario, the what ifs, but in a negative context, you likely struggle with overthinking, because it's so much easier to be like, oh, well, I don't want to do that because what if this happens and then that goes wrong and I don't want blah, blah. Again, all ways in which we've been wired to think that way. And it's important to validate for yourself, if that is you, that comes from something. And to honor that for yourself, like, hey, this comes from somewhere. But at the same time, I don't want to live in a negative bias my whole life. I want to work on that. Knowing that 80% of our thoughts are negative is already like, whoa. I remember when I learned that for the first time, I was just like, that's crazy. All we do as human beings is think, really. And 80% of it is negative. And think about how that negativity perpetuates on top of itself, and we start to form more neural pathways that are wired to be negative. And then we get overthinking on top of that. And so negative thinking patterns are definitely a reason and a sign in which you are an overthinker. And last but not least, number 10, perfectionism. Perfectionism is almost always a byproduct of trauma. I know we don't view it that way. I know we don't talk about it that way. But perfectionism is the need for everything to be predictable and in its place. And yes, some of us are just very organized. We like things to be where they are. But anybody who has a very perfectionistic personality, I would bet money that they have some pain in their past. There's a part of them that feels like if they think out every possible outcome, they take any, necessary action, it will avoid them receiving pain. or feeling a certain type of way. And so a reason that you likely overthink is because you're a perfectionist. And again, we view that as such a positive, right? Well, they have it all together and everything's so nice and they're always on time and everything's always just done correctly and it's fantastic. Being a perfectionist is also exhausting. It is exhausting. I have let down my walls quite a bit when it comes to these things, but there's times where I'll have a full breakdown when I'm doing a craft specifically because something will go wrong and my perfectionistic brain is just like, it's over. I'm done. I'm stupid. I'm a failure. That's ugly. No one's going to like that. No one's going to buy that. Why would you do that? And then you start to overthink. Giving yourself permission and capacity to make mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have everything perfect. And again, these are things that are so much easier said than done. But a huge reason that you might be an overthinker is because you have a perfectionistic, I don't even know if that's a word, but it sounds right, perfectionistic personality type. And I want you to know that that's cool, that's badass, I love that for you, but also that likely comes from pain, and we can't be naive to that. So those are the 10 reasons you might be an overthinker. As always, I feel like I say this on every episode, but it's so important to know, like, we overthink because we care, because our body's trying to keep us safe. The reason that it thinks of every possible outcome is because it doesn't like the unknown. It likes to be 10 steps ahead of us. And when we, oh my goodness, I apologize. When we are trying to think in advance and we don't know the outcome, our brain tries to paint the picture of what that will be. And when we have that negative bias on top of it, we have past negative experiences, we have stress, we have perfectionism in us, it just makes those thoughts spiral. And so the last episode I did, 123, was a while ago. So I think I'm going to do another episode in the next coming weeks about some more ways that we can support ourselves with overthinking. But in the meantime, I would definitely encourage you to check out that episode. Like I said, it was one of my most popular episodes of last year. But I hope you know that if you're an overthinker, it can get better. Noticing the thoughts and things you're telling yourself and trying to catch yourself in them. It's easy for them to just go, and especially if we're spending a lot of time numbing out on our phone, disconnected, put the phone down for a minute and just notice. I drove home today after work and I had the music off, it was just silent, and I just wanted to notice what was going on in my brain. Was it silent? Was it active? What was it saying? In actuality, I was thinking about this episode, which is ironic, but that's because for the first part of it, I was just overthinking about everything that I need to do and everything that I'm stressed out about. And I'm like, let's talk about that. And let's talk about why we overthink. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I hope your March is off to an amazing start. I am bunking down because we have a snowstorm coming tomorrow when this episode is coming out, which I'm excited for, but it has been spring temperatures and now we're getting hit with 25 to 60, it's kind of a mystery number, centimeters of snow. And I was just so starting to enjoy the sunshine, but I hope your guys' March is going fantastic. I hope you're having an amazing day. I hope you know that you're loved and I care about you, and I'm so thankful that you are here and a part of the RTI family. So until next time, all the love, you guys. Goodbye.